Okay, we are now recording part 2 of our Monday nights. So I just created an arrays.js, and this is going to be for the chapter 7 stuff. So the chapter is all about arrays, right? It goes into arrays in great detail. How do you create an array? How do you, get the index number of an item in an array? How do you add something to an array? How do you remove something from an array? And that's all good stuff. I'm going to be really focusing on the properties and methods of arrays. So remember that a method is a function that is attached to an object, and you use the dot syntax in order to call that. And we've seen at least some of them before, like index of, like some function methods we used on strings. Like we got the index number of a particular character string out of that inner text that we retrieved from the web page. I think that was last Wednesday. And we used index of in order to find that. So that's a method that's being used on the string itself. So remember that everything except for primitive values actually is an object. And even some primitive values act like objects in that you can attach methods to them, like the index of. It's attached to a string, which is a primitive value, and it's not technically an object, but it kind of acts like an object in that way. You can also iterate through a string as if it's an array. Arrays are actually objects with a length property and numerical keys, and functions are objects too, which return values that can be passed around like other objects. It's all good times. So let's go ahead and let me just make my little customary comment up here. Except I should actually spell it correctly, I suppose. Let's go ahead and make an array. So we looked at ways to make an array before. I think we used the array literal syntax before, so like let A equal and then closing brackets or straight brackets, and then you can put items in there or whatever. We use a couple of different methods that are actually, well, methods. So let's create one called let decades. So you guys should be following along here, right? And this one, instead of just doing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we will do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, let's say. So the way that we've done it before is with the array literal syntax with the square brackets, and you could put in like 10, 20, etc., 30, 40, 50, whatever you wanted to in here. Nothing wrong with doing it that way. But I'm going to call in the array object. So this is the object from which all arrays are inheriting their properties. So the fact that an array has a numerical key, for instance, is inheriting that from this original array object. So one of the ways to do it, other than using the literal syntax, is to use like array.of. So notice that this is a method that's attached to the original array object. Most of the methods and properties we're going to be using, you attach to the actual array name itself, but some of them, like this, you will go ahead and grab the parent object. So array.of, and then you can put in the values that you want in here, just separated by commas. So 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. It's very simple, similar to the array literal syntax. It's just these values are inside, as arguments in the of method, which is the function. So let's go ahead and just do that. Let decades equals array.of, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Save it. And this actually, I'm doing this under Bispo U4, aren't I? I think that I'm going to close this really quickly. And let me duplicate. I've been duplicating my directory so far, and so I think that I better continue that. Don't you? Let me duplicate that before I do anything else. You guys don't need to do this if you don't want to. As long as you've got like your JS files separate from each other, then they're going to be easy for me to figure out. But I'm going to keep mine separate. So this is going to be unit 5. And then the demo inside of there will be called Bispo U5. Oops, let's try that again. My numpad must be locked. There we go. Okay, good. And now I will open up a different folder. All right, there we go. So let's open up arrays, and then that means I have to go back to the browser. Really. And away. Boy, I got more notifications on this machine than I ever have for any computer I've ever owned. It's ridiculous. It won't leave me alone. Okay, so if you're tired of getting that stuff, then of course you can go into your index file and comment out this script here, which I shall do. And then I will put in the other one. Script source equals, what do we call it, arrays.js. There it is. And now when I go to the browser and open up the console, well, let's see, failed to load resource. It doesn't like array.js. Did I name it wrong? Yes, I keep calling it array.js when actually it should be arrays.js. And now I've forgotten to put it in the JS subfolder. Boy, I'm doing great here, guys. But this is a good lesson anyway. Use the console as your spell check. If you start seeing red showing up in the console, then read what it says and then use what it tells you to fix whatever issues might be there. That's like the best thing that you can do to get full points on labs and exercises that you submit is just go in and check your stuff in the console and make sure everything's working the way that it's supposed to be. In this case, it definitely was not. So it told me what to do. I fixed it. Now I've got full points, at least so far. Okay, finally, here we go. So yes, we said let decades equals array.of and then 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So I'll go over here and just make sure it's working. Decades, and there it is. So it's an array with 5 items, and there they are, and it uses the array literal syntax to return that value. Let's do another one, except we will do array.from. It's fairly common to have an array that you set up at the beginning, usually with a more verbose variable name, and then create another array from this that you can then troubleshoot. You can try out different methods and so on. Some of the methods that we're going to be doing are destructive, meaning if you run them on an array, it will change the array permanently unless you change it back again. Some of them aren't, but some of them are. And so it's fairly common, but no means universal. But we'll let decades equals array.of 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And then let's see, let d equal array.from decades. And something much simpler like this, right? And that way I can just do whatever I want to with this variable. I can smash it to pieces. It won't matter. I can always get back to my original decades array. Either that or store the decades array in a completely different document, right? So let's go over here. Decades is still there. And now we can also use D, and it looks exactly the same. So just be aware, I mean, these things are not referencing the same array at this point, even though it kind of looks like it right now. These are two completely different arrays now with different names and so on. So what I do to one will not be done to the other one. Let's see, what else do we want to do before we move on to some of the other methods? Let's just do, I guess the only other one I want to do, like remember these are methods that are attached on the parent array object. The only other one I can think of that I want to do right now is array, just to find out whether something is actually an array or not, and it returns Boolean for us. So it is, once again, the parent array object, and then the method is array. And then let's just say we want to make sure we made this array from another array. We're getting confused. We want to make sure this thing actually is an array. That's how you do it. Array.isArray with a capital A in both arrays. And then, better do a console.log on that, or else doesn't have any place to put the value. It's just going to return a Boolean, true or false. And there it is, it's true. Cool. So those are just a few simple methods that are attached to the parent array object. And let's do some more. So we'll do some simple methods. And probably the only non-method property I can think of that we want to check is length. So let's just do like d.length. And once again, I'll have to do console.log. There we go. D.length and it shows up 5. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 are the indexes, which adds up to 5 numbers. So some of the other methods that we'll do, these are still simple methods. And by simple methods, I mean it doesn't like pass a function as one of the arguments to the method itself. But we'll quickly move on to those that do, more like functions on arrays as they're referred to. So you'll see what I mean in just a minute. So some of the ones that we've actually already maybe done, I can't remember exactly which ones we've done. We did some of these methods on strings. I guess Wednesday of last week. So we did index of, we did concat, and I can't remember if we did join or not. But join is a way of joining two strings together, and you can do something similar to an array, although it doesn't do quite the same thing. So let's go ahead and do the last one first. Let's do join. So I'm going to say let dstring, and I'm using intercaps here to follow JavaScript naming conventions. d.join, and then I tell it what I want them to join on. Like what? So basically, let me back up for a second. So when I say d.join, what I'm doing is I'm taking all the values in an array and smashing them together as a string. So I'm not sure if it's even going to do anything if I don't pass anything into that parameter. Let me see here real quick. I'm just going to save that and then go over here and type in dstring and see what we get. And okay, yeah, so it actually is smashing all of those together into one string. I'm really surprised that it's adding the commas, actually. That must be because it's saying, well, you didn't give me any value to join these on, so I'm just going to do a comma. Actually, you know what? I shouldn't be surprised. I actually remember that from jobs that I worked on before. That is actually a little issue. So let's say I do, instead of doing a join with no parameter here, I'm going to say like join on a dash inside of a string there. It's kind of like an unhappy guy. And go over here and then dstring. And there you go. So see, it takes a string, takes all those values and puts them in a string and then joins them together with dashes. So where this is useful, and this was not something that I was planning on demoing, but let's say before we do anything, we just did dstring and there it is. I just want to point out that if I go to d again, the array has not been messed with at all. So this is a non-destructive method. It creates a new string value out of the array, but leaves the array itself untouched, which I think is a good thing. Let's say we say something like let template equal, and then I'm going to use the template literal here. One, so I can create a multi-line thing, and two, because I might want to, let's see, what do I want to do here? I'm going to do a d.join. Hang on a second. See, I should prepare this stuff before I show it to you guys, or else I'll have to sit here and think about it while you wait. Yeah, you know what? Let's do this stuff later. This is actually more relevant to when you start doing view templating anyway. So we'll get to that stuff later on. But suffice to say for now that joining arrays together with a string is very useful when you want to template HTML. So let's say I wanted to take those 5 elements in the array and spit them out into list items, right, that are contained within a UL. Then that's what I would do here. I would create a template literal, and I would use the join function, but instead of just putting a dash here, I would join them with like /li, and then starting the new one with li, and then start joining them together into an HTML template like that. So, but later for that. We'll get to that stuff probably next week. For now, just go ahead and leave that at that. Let's do a concat. So in the, let's see. So d.concat 60. .concat, I seem to remember now that we did not actually do this on strings, but this is a method that you can use on strings. For instance, if I go over here and say hello .concat world, like this, and then you can see how it turns that into one string. So it's just like doing hello and then concatenating. That's what concat means, right? It does the same thing, except that this one is contained within a method, right? A method that's being attached to that string, even though string's not an object. It's all very weird stuff here. Oops, don't save. So in this case, d.concat60, we're taking the array and concatenating it instead of a string. So let's go over here and refresh, and I'm just going to type in d, and that has not been changed. So again, it's a non-destructive method. But if we attach this into a console.log here, now it's got the 6 on it here, right? So 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50, and 60. And that's what this does. It just adds another item on there. Now, what I'm not sure of, so I'm not sure if I tried doing this, if we do 60, 70, give it 2 different values, let's see if this works. Let's see if it adds 2 items onto the end there. And yes, it sure does, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and 70. So I suppose there's no actual limit on how many values you can put in there. That's kind of cool. But ultimately, it will leave the original array unaltered, which again is a good thing. Let's see, what else did we do with strings? We did index of with strings. So let's say we do console.log d.index of, and we just want to find, like, we know that the number 30 is in there somewhere, but we don't know what position it's in, let's say. So we just do index of 30, and it should give us a return value of 2 because it's in the nth position of 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So refresh over here, and there it is. There's the 2. You can always, something else that this is good for is checking the line number. I don't know if we talked about that before or not, but if you want to see it, wait, is that the value that I'm trying to get here? Just look at the line number, arrays.js 17, and there it is on line 17. That's the value I'm looking for. So I use that as a very valuable debugging tool all the time. So there's index of, which, as you guys know, we've also done it on strings. We can do it on an array. There's also an includes, which works on strings or arrays. There's also a last index of. So index of will find the first place that 30 shows up, and if there's another one, then last index of will show the last one that shows up. I won't do that. Right? It wouldn't make any difference in this case either. Anyway, so let's see. We push, pop, and reverse. Okay. So these are, I was going to say these are functions that are not going to work on arrays, or rather on strings, but reverse I think does work on strings, actually. But push and pop are array things. In order to, like push will add an element to an array, and pop will remove that last element from an array. So let's go ahead and try it. Remember when we did the concat, this didn't actually add those onto the D string, right? This will. So if I do d.push, this is a very good one to know. d.push 60, and now when I call in that D array, now it's actually part of the array. So unlike concat, which just added it on momentarily, on a different return value, this has actually altered the array itself. So this is, I think, is our first example of an actual destructive method here. We do push in order to add an element to the array, like it actually does it. Now let's get rid of 60 again, just for fun. And that is pop, d.pop. And I don't need to put anything in here, just an empty, it's empty of parameters. And what that will do is it will remove the last item from an array. So I go over here and type in D again, and now we should be back to our 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, and there it is. So use push to add an item to an array, the end of an array, and pop to remove the last item from an array. And let's do D.reverse. Get the sucker going backwards here. So refresh over here and type in D, and now we've got this in reverse order, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. So this is another destructive method, right? This actually changes the array itself. All three of these are. Okay, shift, unshift, and at. Let's do a D.shift, and this is like the opposite of pop. Pop will remove the last item in an array, and shift will remove the first item in an array. I wish that they had used like method names that actually seemed to have something to do with one another, but they didn't. So let's go ahead and try D.shift. This is another destructive method. Save it and go over here and refresh if you need to and type in D, and you can see it now just says 40, 30, 20, 10. It's removed the first element instead of the last one. It got rid of the 50. So how do we get it back again? We say, oh gosh, that was the wrong thing to do. Well, there's an unshift. D.unshift. And this time it's going to be adding an element to the beginning of the array. So it's like the opposite of push. Before we did push 60 to add one to the end. This time we're going to be unshift 50 to add 50 back to the beginning of the array. So D.unshift 50, refresh and then try the D, and there it is. We got it back again. So shift to remove from the beginning of the array, unshift to get it back again, but then of course you have to tell what value you want in that first element. Okay, so at is, I suppose I could have done this upstairs, but anyway, it's a way of getting a particular element at a particular index number. And I know that we already have a way of doing that. We've got, like, let's say we wanted the first item. I want the first element in the array. So I can do D and then use the square bracket syntax to get 0. I better put this in the console.log because it's just a return value. D, and then it should be at the 0th index. And there it is. 50 is the first thing in the array, right? Because we flipped it around, we reversed it. You can also do, I'll go ahead and group these, console.log. Actually, I know what I'll do. D.at 0, not flat, at. Thank you, autocomplete. D.at 0, and this one, as you can see, it's a method, right? It's got the dot syntax and it's got the parentheses afterwards, but it should give us the same result as that. So we should have two 50s in a row. There they are. So what's the difference? Why would you use one or the other one? Well, let's say you want to get the last item in the array. And you don't know how long the array is. I mean, right now we could use array, let's see, console.log. D and then 4, right? We know that's the last item in the array, and it'll give us that 10. But very often you don't know how long the array is. And if you're trying to loop through it or something, you need to get that last number in there. So to get the last item in the array using this square bracket syntax, this array literal syntax, you would have to do d.length minus 1. You guys may have noticed either in this class or in your other classes, but the index number of the last item in the array is 1 less than the length of the array. So in this case, we have 5 items in the array. I know they're backwards from here at this point. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. There's 5 items in the array, and the index of the last item is 4, right? 4 is 1 less than the length of 5. So that's why you use this guy, d.length minus 1, and that will give us that last item there. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with it once you know how to do it. It's just a little bit verbose and not much fun to look at or to type. So one of the things that @ made possible, d.at minus 1. I don't know about you guys. I like that one better. And this should give us the same value of 10. There it is, line 37 and 39, 37 and 39. So these two things do the same thing. I don't know. I like this one. It's just a newer one. It didn't exist before like IS450, I think, something like that. Maybe even 2018. So yeah, some of these methods I think can be a little bit easier to wrangle than some of the older syntax that was inherited from the original C. Okay, so there's shift, unshift, and @ and that gets us to the end of what I think of as the simple methods, and of course the property of length. The rest of these are all methods. So any questions so far? Or anything that you guys want to see again or have questions about or whatever? Okay, so just those 4 sections so far. A few methods on the array parent object, and then these guys that are in common with strings, these guys which are destructive, and these guys which are also destructive except for the @ thing.
Can I see the array turning into a string?
Let's see, this guy right here, right?
For yours, what is that? Is that a minus sign?
Yeah, I just put a hyphen in there.
And
But
yours gave you commas in between?
no, it gave me commas when I didn't put a value in here.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see.
So, and I'd forgotten about that. But if you give it a value, but I put a hyphen in there, but it could be really anything. It could be, let's say I want, I don't know, semicolon, like that. And then what line is this? Line 13? Oh no, actually it doesn't spit out here. Let's do dstring. And now it's connected by semicolons instead. So you can put whatever you want to in that string now.
Okay, I see what's happening. Thanks.
Cool. Including, by the way, just a space if that's what you want. And actually, if you wanted nothing at all, then just an empty string, and that will just slap it all together like this. Okay, cool. So next up, we're going to be doing, let's see, is that the kind of comment I'm using? I guess it doesn't matter. This is going to be methods that pass a function, and mostly at least, return a value from each item in the array. So this is where it starts to get fun. So we're going to start with one that is basically just a loop, but I didn't include it with the discussions on loops. One, because that's not part of that chapter that we did on Friday, and I don't think. And second, because it actually is a function on an array. It's a method on an array. And by the way, there are a few other things that you can use for each on this loop. You can use it on a map. You can use it on a node list. Let's see, is there anything else you can do it on? I think you can do it on a set, perhaps? I don't know. I'll have to check it again. In any case, this is the most common one that you'll see, this method that passes a function. This one does not, this is why I said mostly return a value. This first one does not return a value. It just loops through an array or an array-like object and then does something to each item in the array without causing any damage to the original array. So here's what it looks like. And this is for each. I know PHP has a for each. I assume C++ has a for each. Here's what it looks like in JavaScript. Because it's JavaScript and JavaScript uses the camel case, it's like this, for each. And I'm going to do it the verbose way to start with, just so you can see what it looks like. And this is actually a good time to use the verbose method because it's not returning a value here. You'll see what I mean in a couple minutes. So what that means is that instead of just typing in like some kind of value in here, what we're going to do is we're going to pass a function. Now this is an anonymous function. Remember we defined that before? We didn't go into it much. We're going to talk more about functions on Friday. But a function that doesn't have a name, it has not been declared with a name or assigned to a variable or constant, it's an anonymous function. And actually, if it's assigned to a variable or a constant, it still is an anonymous function to start with because it doesn't have like a function name. A non-anonymous function is when you declare it like, function square, like we did before, right? Square, then, if I spelled it right, is the name of the function, so it's not anonymous. It's got a name. This one does not have a name. And I'm going to start just by passing in a single variable. And then this is one of those things where you'll see this over and over again. You have to remember we've got the code block and the function in curly braces here, but then after that, like it's tempting to like stop there, but you still have to close the parenthesis of the original for each method. And so it closes with curly brace and then close parenthesis like this. And technically, semicolon. I'm not doing semicolons tonight apparently. But let's just do something like this real quick. And I'm just going to do console.logx. So we're doing d.forEach and then passing an anonymous function with a variable. And then that variable, we're going to use it inside the function body just by logging it to the console. Yeah, maybe you guys can see that better. Sorry about that. So here it is. Let's see, why is it giving me two of those? Oh, it didn't it's doing it. It's just these guys. What are these guys up here? 50, 50, 10, 10. Okay, I'm going to do a comment here by logging it to the console. Let's see. There. Now I can see it a little bit better. So there it goes. It just took each item in the array and it spat it out to the console. And so that's all we did. That's the for each. So that's the same thing as if we were to do for and let, I don't know, x, well, since we're using x of d, console.log x, just like upstairs, and we go over here and refresh. It's doing the same thing, right? 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. No difference there whatsoever. I'm going to delete this one, just showing that this does the same thing. So why would you want to use this one? Well, this one makes other items easily accessible in addition to simply the item itself. It's very easy to grab the key and it's very easy to grab the array itself if that's what you need. So I'm going to modify this a little bit. I'm going to get rid of the x's and I'm going to use some verbose names here, and I'm going to say element, index, and array. So this is actually three different arguments that I have available here instead of just one. So this one will give me the element itself. This is taking the place of x before. It's the first parameter. And then this will give me the index number of that element. And then if I need it, I can get the array itself. So I'm going to go ahead and do these in probably opposite order down here in the console.log. I'm going to spit out the array. And then I will spit out the index. Is that how I typed it? Yes, index. And then maybe a colon here to make things easier to see, and then element. So take a look at that for a minute and make sure that you got it right. And when I go over here, let me pull this out a little bit here. So this is the array itself. Each time it goes through one of the items in the array, it gives me the array, the index number, a colon, and the actual element. So this is the 0 and 50, 1 and 40, 2 and 30, etc., all preceded by the array itself. So that's just to show you what you've got available. Now, you don't always need those, of course. Most of the time, all you need is the element. Maybe a little bit more often, you also need the index, and once in a while, you need the array. Not very often, which is why they did them in this order, which is very handy. The fact that, yeah, sometimes I can just, actually most of the time I can just put X in there because that's all I need. And then maybe sometimes I do X and I. Very occasionally I'll do X, I, and A. So that is the first of the methods that we are doing, which passes a function as an argument into the array method. This is one of the cool things about JavaScript, by the way. I mean, not just that it's got all these cool methods on arrays, but the fact that you can pass a function into another function as an argument. The fact that functions are just values that can be swapped around wherever you might want them. Not all scripting languages do this. It's definitely a cool feature. I like it. Let's do some more because they're fun. Next up is going to be, I'm kind of taking these in, well, kind of sort of in alphabetical order. Not entirely. But I'll jump back a little bit here. We'll do every. So what this does is it tests to see if every item in the array passes a condition. So I want to check and see if all the items in my array are less than 100, which we know they are, but maybe I don't know that. Maybe I've got 500 items in the array and I don't want to go look at them all. I just want to loop through and see if they all are under 100 or not. So let's go ahead and do this. It's going to be d.every, and then I'll do it the way that I did this upstairs here, and then we'll do it a different way, which I think you'll see is going to be better. So we'll start by passing in the function, and we will only need the one parameter here of x. And these are mostly going to be returned. So almost all of these, the for each doesn't necessarily use a return, and map doesn't necessarily use a return. Oh, actually, map does use a return, actually. I think they all return values except for each. This one is not returning any value. It's simply performing some kind of a function on all the elements in the array. But in just about all these other ones, we're going to be returning a value. So d.every function x and return x is less than 100. So it's going to be a Boolean, either true or false, right? It will only work if all of the items in the array are less than 100. So I guess we should do console.log on all of these. Yeah, I guess we're going to have to. So let's do console.log and then cut and paste this into the console.log like so. So this should just give you a Boolean, true or false. So save and go back over here. There it is, true. Okay, so every item in the array is under 100. Cool. Let's go ahead and just see what happens if it's false. Let's say I want to see if every item in my array is under 40, and that's going to return false, right? Because not every item in the array is under 40. 40 is not under 40, and 50 is not under 40. Okay, so let's write this a simpler way. I want you to recall what we talked about briefly last week, which is the arrow function, right? Instead of using the keyword function like this, I can just use x and then the fat arrow, the equals and greater than sign, which looks like this. I guess I'll have to put it in the console.log again. And we will do d.every, so it's going to be the same function. Instead of doing function keyword, just do x, and then the fat arrow, and then the code block, and then return x is less than 40. And once again, we should get false there, right? It does exactly the same thing as what's up here. This one sets scope and this one does not. I don't know if we're going to get to that on Friday or not when we talk about functions. I hope so, because that's important. But this might leave you wondering, well, why am I do this? And it's not that much harder to type in the keyword function and put a couple of parentheses. It's not that bad. But remember, if you will, that if all you're doing is returning a value, you can put all this on one line without the curly braces and without the return keyword even. So let's first get it on one line. Oops. Like this. So now we see everything is all on one line. And now I'm going to take away the curly brackets and the keyword return. Like so. This, my friends, does the same thing as this. And in this case, it's not just that it's less verbose and that it's more concise and that it's easier to write and that it's easier to read. It changes the way that we program when we can do something like this. We're much more likely to be running functions and returning values from them if we can do them in very simple, quick language like this. We're much more likely as coders to start using functions as values the way JavaScript intended it to be from the beginning, except that this nice simple syntax didn't exist until 2015. And even after that, we couldn't use it for a couple of years because of browsers. But let's test it here, okay? So this is very simple. And look at this. Like, there's no longer any need for me to break this console.log up into a code block here. Like, there's no need not to just do this at this point because this is super easy to read just as it is. So I've taken this 5-line code block and turned it into a single line of code that, without making it like really even harder to read. Right? It's still, once you're used to the fat arrow syntax, it's like, this is super easy to read, no problems. That's an improvement. And it still works. It's giving me the 2 falses. Very good. So if you want to, I wouldn't, but you can delete this one if you want to, but I would do it just like this. I would leave this in there for your notes. So you've got this guy and then use an or in a comment and then show it in the more concise version, IS450. And so that you can see for yourself, oh wait, yeah, this is the improvement that's been made in the last decade in JavaScript. I wish other languages like PHP were making the same kinds of improvements. That would be nice. Nothing against PHP. Well, maybe a little bit against PHP. Okay, so that's every. From now on, I'm going to do all of them like this. Wherever possible, I'm just going to use the simple syntax here. So sum does the same thing, except that it returns true if any of the items in the array are, meet a certain condition. So let's do our console.log. If you want to, you can just copy and paste this last one, and then just change the method name if you want to. It's up to you. d.sum, you might want to type it in at first just so you get kind of, the pattern of it in your fingers. Return x is less than 40, and this time it should return true because it is true that some of the values in the array are less than 40. We've got a 10, a 20, and a 30. So there we go. We've got false, false, and true there for the 2 every functions, and then the sum function here returns true because some items are under 40. If we were to change this to like under 5 or something, then true. Why is that true? Oh, greater than 5. What am I doing? I meant to do less than 40 like before. Sorry about that. So, but it's still true because some items are less than 40. And then if we do some items are less than 5, this is the one that should give us false. There we go. That is not an uncommon mistake with me. Okay, hopefully you're already starting to get a sense of how powerful these can be. Let's do a few more. Filter is one of the really powerful ones. And what it does is it does the same thing as every and sum. It checks all the values in an array against a condition. but then it returns a new array containing only the elements that pass that condition. This is very handy, folks. Very handy stuff. Let's do, in this case, yeah, let's create a new array. Let's say let, I don't know, E equals D dot filter. And let's do the same thing. X, I keep doing that, X less than 40, right? So this should create a new array named E that has 3 items in it, 10, 20, and 30. It might be in reverse order because I think we reversed that array before. We haven't got around to unreversing it yet. So I guess it'll be in reverse order, so it should be 30, 20, and 10 in this new array. So just do that. Let E equals D.filter, and then our little pattern in there. X return X is less than 40. And then if I go over here and type in E, there's our new array of 30, 20, and 10. Very handy. There's a couple of others that are like this. Let's see. I was giving comments on these before, wasn't I? Maybe I'll go ahead and comment these out a little bit so it doesn't get so messy. So this is going to be for each, and then we're doing every, sum, and then let's do these in a new section here. Oh wait, we just did filter, right? Okay, so we just did filter, which is one of my favorites. And let's do find. So let's go back to console.log, d.find, our little pattern, x function. X is, no, I'll keep going with less than 40. It seems to be working. So what this will do is this will find the first item that meets this condition. So in this case, that should be 30. And there it is. There's the 30. And this is related to find index. So let's say I want to find the first item that meets that condition, but instead of returning the element, I want to return the index of that element. So I will do the console.log and then d.find. Oh, this is find index, sorry. And then x is less than 40. And this should give us 2. Right? Because it's 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, which is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And there it is, 2. There's also, we won't do them right now, but there's also a find last and find, is it find index last or find last index? I think it's find last index. Well, let's just see. Code will let me know. Find, oh, it doesn't know. Let's see, find index. It doesn't know either of them, so I'll find out. I think it's find last index, which will just give you the last item that meets that condition instead of the first one in each of these cases. Find last and find last index. We won't do those right now. Okay, just 2 more to go, and then we will be done with this portion of it. These are 2 very powerful ones. These are on the same order of usefulness as filter. Filter is very, very powerful and very useful one. The next ones are map and reduce. Reduce is the most complex ones, and you can look up like tutorials on like how to use reduce array method in JavaScript, and you will very quickly, well, I don't know, maybe you're smarter than me, but a lot of the tutorials, I mean, you get lost so quickly when you're trying to read about what they're trying to do with this method. So I'm just going to use like a very, very simple example, which hopefully will be, consumable. But first, let's do map. Map is cool. Map is another way of creating a new array. Remember that we created a new array with, what do we do with filter, right? Um, um, this one is going to be map. And it will basically, it'll run through the D array, and then every item on there, it will perform an action on it, like the first one for each, but then it will take those modified elements, those modified values, and add them to a new array. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is going to be, let's see, we did decades, right? So let's say let centuries equals, and then d.map. And what we'll do with our little x value here is we'll do x times 10. So it's going to take every item in the D array, multiply it by 10, and then add that new value into the centuries array. Let's check it out. So instead of 50, 40, 30, 20, 10, it should say 500, 400, 300, 200, and 100. So let's save this, go over here, and just type in our value, centuries, or identifier rather. There it is, 500, 400, 300, 200, and 100. Very useful. And our last one here, which is reduce. And for the first time out of all of these, I mean, we did play around with doing multiple arguments in this one, or multiple parameters filled. We have to in this last one. There's no way, well, no, I won't say that. There is a way to make it work with only one parameter, but it's usually not what you intended it to do. It'll do something, but I don't think I've ever used it with one parameter that my first reaction wasn't like, huh? And then when I look over it again and realize what it's been doing, okay, that's why it did that. But almost always you use two parameters with it here. So what we're going to do is we will go back to doing console.log. And I will do d.reduce. And then let's go ahead and leave this empty for a moment. So I'm going to go back over here to the browser and just type in D real quick here. So here's our array. We've still got it here. We did a couple of permutations of it and then got it back into almost its original form. It's been reduced, but nothing else. Or not reversed, reversed. 50, 40, 30, 20, 10. So here's what I want to do with this array. I want to take all of these numbers and add them together and get the result. You might want to do this, for instance, with an invoice, right? Maybe these are different invoice line items, and each of the line items has a certain dollar cents value, and you want to add them all up for a total. Or maybe you want to add a percentage of tax, sales tax to each of them, and then add them up, whatever. So that's what reduce is good for. It's good for taking one value and then getting it to interact with the next value in some way, then taking that result and getting it to interact with the next value in some way, and then so on and so forth, and it'll keep looping all the way through the array until it has added them all together or multiplied them all together or done something else, whatever it is that you want them to do. Now, in order to get this to work in a straightforward way, this is where you need the two different parameters. So please recall, when you've got two different parameters, like say we'll use x and y, right? You can't do this, x comma y, and then do this here. It's giving me a problem there. It's saying, yeah, I don't know what you're doing. Y is declared, but its value is never read. You've got to put these, when you've got more than one parameter that you're passing in, they need to go in their own set of parentheses. I know it's starting to look a little crazy here, but x comma y, and then the arrow function, and then whatever you're going to do with these guys. So in this case, I think the simplest thing to do is to add them all together. So who's got an answer? Anybody here good at math? 50 plus 40 plus 30 plus 20 plus 10. Let's see what it's going to be. That's 90, 120, 140, 150. Okay, so we should get 150 as a result from this if we add them all together. So here we go. We're passing in two parameters, x and y, and we're going to do x plus y. So what it's doing is it's saying for each pair of numbers, treat those as x and y and add them together. So x and y are going to be the 50 and 40, and then the next x and y are going to be that result and then 30. And then the x and y after that is going to be that result and then the 20. And adding each of those two pairs together. Let's go ahead and see if I was right in my math. There we go, 150. Awesome. Isn't that cool? So let me show you like what would be a common mistake. Way to do this. Console.log d.reduce. And when I say a common mistake, like I say, I've done this before and then been baffled at the result and then realized I was doing it wrong more than once. So this would be passing in only a single parameter instead of an x and a y, just doing an x, and then saying x plus x. And thinking, oh, well, this will work, right? Almost guaranteed this will give us a different result here. Yeah, 800, look at that. So I think what's happening here is that it's saying, okay, you're only giving it 1 instead of 2. So it's saying, okay, 50 plus 50 is 100. And then take that and add it to like 40 plus 40, which would be 180. And so I think that's what it's doing. Although that doesn't seem like it would add up to 800, does it? Truthfully, I'm not even sure. I mean, I get baffled by this. Just remember, do it this way. If you're going to do a reduce, then pass it 2 parameters so that you can use those to represent each pair of numbers as you go through. And you can add them all together, you can multiply them all together, you can do all kinds of different operations to them. In this case, I'm just thinking math operations because we've got numbers for the elements, but there's all kinds of different things that you can do. I mean, it gets really crazy when you've got an array of functions and then you pass each of those into a reduce function so that they act on each other in a composition kind of way. It gets nuts. But this is a pretty simple example, I think. I'm going to put this in as a comment here, and you should too, just so you know, don't do that. Or do it all as a multi-line comment. All right, I think that's it. I think we're done. I wanted to show you that because I think that, you can probably tell, I like this part of JavaScript. Most of this stuff didn't, well, not most of it. Yeah, I guess most of it didn't happen until 2015. I mean, before that, we had the for each, I believe, and all this stuff that's before, like the simple stuff, we had most of it, except for add, I don't think we had. But like push, pop, reverse, and unshift, and all that stuff was there. But most of this stuff, methods that pass a function and most of the reverse return of value, I think for each is the only one that we've had for very long. The rest of these happened in 2015 or later. And the really cool ones, I think, are the filter, map, and reduce. Those are the ones that are just mind-bogglingly useful. One of my favorite things about JavaScript right here. Okay, so any questions about those? Or you want to see any part of it again? All right, cool. Hopefully that was a little bit more fun than just taking your way through and our way through and just saying, yeah, this is an array. Here's how you put one item into an array and so on. I think this is the fun part of arrays in JavaScript and make it a little different from other scripting languages. I will stop the recording.